Homage to the original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Today, we study the 5th verse of the Dhammapada, wrong but thought to be right. Right but thought to be wrong, trapped in wrong views. The path to enlightenment stands outside. The next verse presents the opposite idea. Right is known as right. Wrong is known as wrong, dwelling in right view. The path to enlightenment is not long. The Buddha explained this verse from a specific event. Each verse in the Dhammapada is connected to a story or a particular event. Therefore, the Buddha composed this verse. This verse is linked to the story of the two disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana. The story is long, but I will summarize it briefly. After attaining enlightenment, the Buddha taught the 5 ascetics, the oldest of whom was Anandakya. When the Buddha was born, 5 Brahmins came to observe his auspicious signs. One of them, the youngest and most skilled, was Kya. After the Buddha practiced severe asceticism, the 5 ascetics followed him in practice. Kya was older than the Buddha, but still followed him. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, he went to find and teach the 5 ascetics, including Kya, who was already in his 50s, while the Buddha was only 35 years old. Among the 5 ascetics, one named Assaji was the first to meet and convert Sariputta, who then attained enlightenment. After teaching the 5 ascetics, the Buddha continued to teach a young man named Gatha, who was wealthy, intelligent, and virtuous. After attaining enlightenment, Gatha brought 54 friends to practice, all of whom attained fruition. At that time, there were 60 arahants in the world. Later, the Buddha went to the Uruvayakapa region and converted 30 young men from the Bhajyuta lineage, and all of them attained enlightenment. Afterward, the Buddha came across a group of ascetics who worshipped fire and practiced severe asceticism. These ascetics had very powerful supernatural powers. They could walk on water, make fire burn intensely, and summon rain. They were famous for their supernatural powers. The Buddha had to use his own supernatural powers to convert them. Here, we notice this: there are people who, when we speak reasoning, they listen and follow the teachings of the Buddha. But there are others who, when we speak reasoning, do not listen. For these people, only when supernatural powers are demonstrated do they become afraid and then follow. There are 2 types of people like this. The first type is the powerful person. These people, when they only hear reasoning, do not listen, because the one speaking reasoning is still poorer or inferior to them. Only when supernatural powers are demonstrated do they fear and revere the teacher, and then follow. That is why wealthy people often seek teachers with supernatural powers to become their disciples. The second type is those who have already attained supernatural powers. When reasoning is spoken to them, they do not listen. In this case, only when a higher level of supernatural powers is demonstrated do they become willing to listen. This was also the case. The Buddha encountered the 3 brothers, the Kasyapa brothers, who practiced fire worship and had attained supernatural powers. The Buddha did not use reasoning to speak to them, he only used his own supernatural powers. When the Kasyapa brothers lit a fire, the Buddha walked by, and the fire immediately extinguished. Wherever the Buddha walked by, the fire went out and could not be rekindled. At that time, the 3 brothers, the Kasyapa brothers, tried to approach and speak with the Buddha. When they arrived, they saw the Buddha sitting there. But as soon as they turned around, the Buddha had disappeared. This surprised them, and they began to pay closer attention. This could have been the time when the Buddha performed the most supernatural feats in his life. At other times, he rarely used supernatural powers, mainly relying on morality and reasoning to guide beings. But with the 3 Kasyapa brothers, who were fire worshippers. The Buddha performed 1.500 supernatural feats to convert them. This was necessary because the brothers also possessed high supernatural powers, making their conversion very difficult. These 3 brothers had 1.000 disciples. After the 3 brothers submitted to the Buddha, all of their 1.000 disciples also became followers of the Buddha. At that time, the monastic community grew large, reaching over 1.000 members, largely due to the group of fire worshippers joining. After converting the fire worshipping group, the Buddha delivered a sermon titled Fire. This teaching became very famous. After stabilizing the region, the Buddha returned to the city of Rajagaha to meet King Bimbisara. As he had promised, King Bimbisara greatly revered the Buddha. 6 years earlier, he had met a remarkable man who had not yet attained enlightenment. But now he saw an enlightened being beyond comprehension. King Bimbisara took refuge in the Buddha and became his disciple. And soon, all his ministers followed suit. Once the king took refuge, who dared to refuse? The ministers and wealthy Brahmins saw this and also took refuge. At that moment, nearly the entire city of Rajagaha became the Buddha's disciples. The Buddha had a very special destiny. He was born in a small kingdom far from the capital, Kapilavastu. But after attaining enlightenment, he established the foundation of his teachings in the capital Rajagaha of the Magadha kingdom. The entire kingdom followed the Buddha, and it became the first Buddhist capital. This was a very special event. If it had been another religion, the Buddha could have maintained Rajagaha as a religious center, like the Vatican. However, because the Buddha did not seek to establish a fixed organization, he relaxed the structure. And over time, it gradually faded. Otherwise, Rajagaha might have become the Buddhist capital, much like the Vatican today. Later, King Bimbisara offered the Buddha a bamboo grove to build a monastery for the monks. This grove was known as Velyavana, or the Bamboo Grove. This became a very famous place. Velu means bamboo, and Vana means grove. The king had buildings constructed for the monks, creating paths within the bamboo grove. What was special was that the air in the bamboo grove was very fresh. Even though bamboo has thorns, the grove, rich in bamboo, provided an atmosphere that was very beneficial for health. Therefore, if anyone has land for a garden, planting bamboo can help improve the air quality. At the bamboo grove, in the Velyavana monastery, the 2 venerable disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana, came to take refuge and ordain as monks under the Buddha. Who were these 2 venerable ones? We will briefly cover their lives here. And when we study the history in detail, we will delve deeper, as their story is quite fascinating. Near the city of Rajagaha, there were 2 neighboring villages, each with a wealthy clan leader. In those days, the wealthiest person was usually the head of the village. These 2 families were very close. Each family had 1 son, and the 2 families were so inseparable that the sons seemed to have been close since birth. Wherever they went, they were always together, except when they went home to rest, at which point they would return to their own homes, though sometimes they would visit each other. When one of them returned home, the other also had a bed and a separate room to rest in. They were so close that it seemed as though they had made a vow in a past life. These 2 young men were highly virtuous, intelligent, talented, and handsome. As they grew up, they became famous for their skills and good character. Everyone knew that the 2 clan leaders had sons who were precious, highly skilled, and well loved by all. However, these young men did not marry. They were only interested in seeking philosophy and enjoying life. They would attend festivals, have fun, and enjoy entertainments. But they had no interest in family matters or managing wealth. Their lives were very comfortable. Their parents pampered them because they saw their children were virtuous and intelligent. With their great wealth, they did not need to work, they could simply enjoy life. However, as they became more aware, they began to yearn for something absolute, not wanting to be immersed in the fleeting pleasures of life. Both Sariputta and Moggallana were like this as well. After enjoying the pleasures of life, they sat down and discussed the nature of existence. They realized that life is simply a continuous change, with joy and sorrow, birth and death, ever ongoing. People will die eventually. They felt that these thoughts were very similar to what the Buddha had pondered when he was a prince. People constantly fight for fame and fortune, competing over the smallest things. The lucky ones live, and the unlucky ones die. Life goes on with suffering and joy, with nothing certain. Therefore, they decided to seek something higher, beyond the cycle of birth and death. Their determination to leave home caused their parents much sorrow. However, because they loved their children so much, they did not dare to stop them. Although deeply concerned, the parents did not try to intervene, for they knew they had accumulated debts in past lives to these children and dared not command them. The two sons had been born with great blessings, so their parents could only cry and feel sadness, unable to prevent them. On their journey to find the truth, they encountered a mindset similar to what we experience today. At that time, the Buddha had not yet settled at the Velluvana monastery, as he was practicing austerities in the forest. His forest was not far from Rajagaha. However, the Buddha only stayed in Rajagaha for a short time because he became so famous that he had to leave for further practice. He had practiced severe austerities under two ascetics, Alarikalama and Uddaka Ramapada. During those 6 years, the Buddha was not known, and no one knew where he was. In Rajagaha, there was a famous ascetic named Sanjaya. He both taught and practiced austerities and meditation. His teachings were rich and profound. So many people followed him. At that time, Sanjaya was the most famous teacher in the region, with the largest following in Rajagaha. Sariputta and Moggallana were also caught in this mindset. They thought that anyone with many followers must be teaching the truth, that such a teacher must be a true master. They thought this way, so they decided to join Sanjaya and request ordination under him. They practiced his methods and meditated diligently. Whenever they asked him questions, he would teach. But sometimes they would ask further questions, and he would not have the answer. This was when they realized that the teachings of Sanjaya did not address the fundamental issues they were searching for. Despite this, Sariputta and Moggallana still had great respect for their teacher, even though they saw his limitations. Their teacher-disciple relationship remained strong. In particular, Sariputta was very devoted to his teacher. After some time, the two of them felt dissatisfied with Sanjaya's teachings, as their wisdom had surpassed what their teacher could explain. They meditated sincerely and practiced austerities diligently, but they could not find the ultimate truth. Although Sanjaya had many disciples, and people still visited and made offerings, those living within the community felt that his teachings were incomplete. Therefore, they decided to ask their teacher for permission to leave and become wandering monks, meaning they would travel from place to place in search of the truth. The two of them traveled extensively, not only in the Magadha region but across the east, west, north, and south. Whenever they heard of a famous ascetic in a particular area, they would seek them out to learn from them. However, whenever they visited any teacher and asked questions, the teacher would ask them in return, and both of them could answer easily. So they continued traveling, never staying anywhere for long. The two of them wandered like this for many years, until they eventually returned home and said, "We have not yet encountered a teacher who can awaken us. We can only practice the teachings we know. As for the path to immortality, if anyone finds it, let them inform us." And so, they returned home and built a small hut in the garden to practice. Their parents were overjoyed to have them return after so many years. However, even though they had returned, the two sons still did not marry. Instead, continuing their practice, they built a hut in the garden. And every day, their family would bring them food. They spent their time meditating, cultivating their minds, and practicing austerities diligently. During this time, the Buddha had attained enlightenment and began to teach. He returned to Rajagaha, and from the Velluvana monastery, he instructed his disciples to spread the truth everywhere. One day, Sariputta had a special encounter. He entered the city of Rajagaha, where Sariputta, one of the first 5 disciples of Kyotrán Nu, was also begging for alms. By this time, Sariputta had become an arahant, and he carried himself with the dignity, composure, and purity of a saint, with a radiant face like a halo. Although ordinary people might not have noticed, with his keen intuition and sharp wisdom, Sariputta immediately recognized Sariputta as an extraordinary teacher. At that time, Sariputta was wearing a robe that was somewhat luxurious, as he came from a wealthy family. As he walked through the city, he suddenly saw an older monk, wearing a humble robe, walking in to beg for alms. Trusting his intuition, Sariputta sensed that this monk was no ordinary person, but an enlightened teacher. He approached and respectfully bowed to the monk, then followed him without speaking a word. After Sariputta completed his alms round, he sat under a tree to rest. Sariputta spread his own robe on the ground to invite him to sit, then sat beside him. After the meal, Sariputta knelt and asked, "Venerable Sir, where are you from? Who is your teacher? What practice do you follow that has led you to such extraordinary wisdom? Your face is so pure and calm, like a beam of light. I have never seen anyone like this in my life." Sariputta, with the humility of an arahant, replied, "My teacher is the great monk Gautama. He has taught that all phenomena arise due to causes and conditions." Upon hearing this, Sariputta immediately had a realization and attained the stream entry state. Then, Sariputta continued, "And all phenomena also disappear and decay according to causes and conditions. This is what my teacher, the great monk Gautama, has confirmed." Sariputta immediately gained enlightenment from the first 2 verses. But the latter 2 did not lead to further realization. However, upon hearing the first 2 lines, he suddenly awakened and understood the principle of dependent origination. He stood up, bowed to Sariputta, and asked, "Venerable Sir, may I ask where the great monk Gautama is?" Sariputta replied, "He is in Velluvana monastery, in the garden of King Bimbisara." At this point, the Velluvana monastery was already well known, but Sariputta may not have been aware of it. Upon hearing the information, Sariputta returned home and met with Moggallana, recounting the entire story and sharing the verses he had heard from Sariputta. As soon as Moggallana heard the first 2 lines, he also had an instant realization and attained the stream entry, Sotapanna, state. The 2 brothers decided to visit their former teacher, Sanjaya, to share the newfound wisdom and invite him to Velluvana monastery, where the great monk Gautama was teaching the path to enlightenment. They recited the verses that Sariputta had taught them. When they met Sanjaya, they said, "Master, today we met an actual arahant in the world. He taught us a verse that helped us open our wisdom and see the path to immortality. We invite you to come with us to Velluvana Monastery, where the great monk Gautama is teaching. However, upon hearing this, Sanjaya did not feel the awakening. He still refused to go. When asked why, Sanjaya responded, "I have devoted my life to the path, seeking the truth and desiring to find the door to immortality. But now, someone has opened that door. Why should I not go?" Despite their persistent persuasion, Sanjaya refused to change his mind. So, Sariputta and Moggallana continued their journey to Velluvana Monastery, where Gautama was teaching the path to enlightenment. The two brothers continued to try to persuade their former teacher, but Sanjaya remained unmoved. Finally, Sanjaya posed a challenging question. In this world, who is more numerous, the wise or the foolish? Sariputta replied, "Master, clearly, the foolish are more numerous than the wise." Sanjaya laughed and said, "Well, if the wise cannot attain anything even when they come here, then I will stay here with the masses, and I will be revered by them. The masses will make me great." This statement left both Sariputta and Moggallana deeply embarrassed, as they realized that their teacher was not truly seeking the truth but rather seeking fame and respect from the majority. They saw the true nature of their teacher, whom they had once believed to be someone devoted to the search for wisdom. Faced with this reality, Sariputta made a famous remark. "Master, you will become famous for this statement." And indeed, Sanjaya did become famous, but for seeking fame rather than truth. Afterward, the two brothers decided to leave and go to Velluvana Monastery to meet Gautama. When they arrived, the Buddha was teaching the monks. He stopped his discourse and said, "Here come Sariputta and Moggallana, a pair of brothers with perfect karmic connections." Although the teaching the Buddha gave led many to enlightenment, both Sariputta and Moggallana did not immediately attain any insights. It was only after a week that Sariputta attained arahantship, and a week later, Moggallana also attained the same. Some texts state that they both attained enlightenment at the same time, but others suggest there was a 1-week difference, as Sariputta had slightly greater wisdom. When both brothers attained arahantship, the Buddha declared that they would be made the chief disciples and leaders of the Sangha, surpassing all other elders in the community. This decision astonished the monks, as Sariputta and Moggallana were still quite young, while the other elders had been practicing for many years. Some of the monks began to question the Buddha's decision, wondering if he was showing favoritism towards Sariputta and Moggallana. The Buddha responded, "I do not favor anyone. This decision is based on the karmic connections that have already been established. In the past, Kyo Tran Nu made a vow to be the first to attain enlightenment. And today, I am fulfilling that." Similarly, the 55 brothers of Gayaka made a vow and attained arahantship. As for Moggallana and Sariputta, they have made vows in many past lives to assist the Buddha and lead the Sangha. So today, I am fulfilling that karmic connection. Upon hearing the Buddha's explanation, all the monks understood that the decision to make Sariputta and Moggallana the chief disciples was based on karmic causes from many past lives, and they accepted the Buddha's arrangement. The story continues with a discourse from the Buddha, where he criticizes the wrong views of Sanjaya, who sought admiration from the masses and the honor of having many disciples. The Buddha explained that truth is not found in the majority but in the truth. When someone seeks the admiration of the crowd instead of practicing the truth, they are on the wrong path. This was the Buddha's critique of those who prioritize fame over enlightenment and truth. The Buddha's Dhamma verse * wrong but thought to be right. Right but thought to be wrong. Dwell in wrong views. The path to enlightenment is outside. Right. Then know it is right. Wrong. Then know it is wrong. Resting in right view. The path to enlightenment is not long. The Buddha emphasizes that those with true wisdom will recognize the difference between right and wrong. They will not be swayed by wrong views or mistaken beliefs but will always remain grounded in right view. The path to enlightenment. Those who are only concerned with gaining the praise of the masses, without seeking the truth, will not make progress in their spiritual practice. After Sariputta and Moggallana left their teacher Sanjaya to follow the Buddha, they attained arahantship and became the Buddha's chief disciples. All of Sanjaya's followers also left and followed the Buddha. As a result, Sanjaya's grove became empty, with no one left following him. His failure to gain fame caused him to collapse emotionally, leading to his sorrowful death. Critique of false beliefs in life *. The Buddha points out that there are many mistaken beliefs that people easily fall into. One of which is the misunderstanding that actions which are actually wrong can bring merit. A typical example of this is the belief in fire worship in the religious practices of India at that time. According to this belief, fire was considered sacred and had the power to connect humans with divine beings. Those who worship fire and bowed to it would receive great blessings, avoid being reborn in bad realms, and upon death, would ascend to heaven. Why the belief in fire worship is false *. Although this belief may seem reasonable, in reality, it is a false view. Fire is merely a natural element, without the ability to offer salvation or merit. It is simply a natural phenomenon in the universe, not a means to attain liberation or salvation. Worshipping fire and considering it a path to transcendence is pure superstition, without any foundation in the truth of the Buddha's teachings. Meaning of this lesson *. The Buddha clearly teaches that actions which seem right but are actually wrong will not bring true liberation or genuine merit. The belief in fire worship is a prime example of this misunderstanding. Those who believe in it think that they will gain great merit. But in reality, they are simply following a misguided tradition, without any firm basis in truth. The Buddha's teachings use the image of mistaken beliefs in life to teach us a lesson about true understanding and enlightenment. We should not merely seek superficial things or the praise of the masses, but instead remain steadfast on the path of truth and right view in order to attain liberation. Now that I have the Buddha's teachings, I realize how illogical those ideas were. In the past, people spoke of such things, and it seemed reasonable at the time. This led to the belief in the sanctity of fire, with people gathering around to worship fire, thinking it brought merit, instead of spending time helping others, showing love, fulfilling their duties, and practicing meditation to calm the mind. People wasted too much time bowing to a flame, believing it brought merit. But does bowing to a fire bring merit? No, it doesn't. This is a misunderstanding. Right is thought to be wrong, and wrong is thought to be right. The first mistake people make is misunderstanding merit. There are many worldly things, but when practicing the Dharma, the most important thing is creating real merit. What is true merit? And how should it be created? We should not fall into the trap of mistaken beliefs passed down through generations. We may think it's merit, but in reality, even the gods would disapprove. Then there's the custom in India of bathing in the Ganges River. At that time, the Ganges was a mighty river, with swift currents, and there were many mythological stories surrounding it. People believed that the Ganges was water that flowed down from the heavens, unlike smaller streams, and that it had a divine nature. Therefore, they thought that by simply dipping in the water, they could wash away all sins. Does this seem reasonable? It sounds very logical because they based their reasoning on the premise that the water came from heaven. If we accept that premise, the reasoning that follows seems acceptable. People believed that bathing in the Ganges brought merit. Indians always longed to bathe there. And if one were to die and be cast into the Ganges, they would surely ascend to heaven. Even today, if you go to India, you may witness scenes of corpses being pushed into the Ganges. Some believe that even touching the water of the Ganges will bring divine blessings, even if it costs a little money for medicine or other ritual items. But they believe it's divine. Tourists today may still witness people placing their hands on a dead body, scooping up water, and drinking it immediately on the spot. The bodies are either submerged or cremated by the river, and the ashes are scattered. Sometimes, a living person might even be thrown into the Ganges to gain blessings. People think this is merit, believing in life and death. Now, from a Buddhist perspective, when we see people who are not Buddhist, but who understand merit in this way, it can seem absurd. But, let me tell you, we too may be doing the same thing. There are things we think are merit, but they are not. Let me share an uncomfortable truth: that is not merit. You might say, but I've been chanting this particular sutra, believing it will bring great merit, and spend all your time doing so because you believe it brings immense blessings. But in reality, the gods up above would just be laughing. Just like those people worshipping fire or bathing in the Ganges, wasting time on things that are ultimately meaningless. That is not true merit. Even now, we may believe that by spending all our time chanting the name of a Buddha, thinking it brings infinite merit. But be careful. The Buddha himself might be laughing. The Buddha does not teach like that. The Buddha does not teach in this way. Now, let's test this. Let's imagine that you are the Buddha. Does the Buddha have an ego or not? The Buddha is without ego. For example, imagine each of us as a Buddha who has transcended ego, no longer considering ourselves important. That's what a Buddha must be like. When we no longer consider ourselves important. Does our name matter? Our name doesn't matter. In Zen, there's a saying about a painting of a lost cow, where the cow is gone and the person is simply gazing at the moon. A Zen master commented underneath this painting, thousands of people call, but the cow does not turn its head. This means the mind is still, detached from the name. Let's temporarily assume that the person's name is something like Tony. That name might be incredibly beautiful. But when we have not yet attained enlightenment, our mind is not pure. And that name is truly who we are. Right? If someone calls that name out to insult us, we take it personally. If our name is written on a piece of paper and stepped on, we feel hurt because we still identify with that name. But when we reach enlightenment, that name no longer defines us, and we are detached from it. If people write our name on the ground, step on it, or insult it, we don't feel anything. If they praise our name, calling us the greatest person in the world, we remain unmoved, because that name is no longer connected to us. A person with a pure heart is detached from their name and the illusory external identities. The Buddha, being millions of times more exalted, is he still attached to his name? No. Now, if someone keeps calling out to his name to ask for blessings, would the Buddha find that amusing? Would he feel pity for them? In reality, the Buddha would not abandon them because they have created a connection with him through sincere devotion. But the way they are practicing is incorrect. So, what is the correct way to practice? We understand this. What does meme mean? It means to remember. When we chant the name of the Buddha, what does it mean? It means to remember the Buddha. And we have 3 ways to remember the Buddha. 1. The first way is to chant the Buddha's name all day long. 2. The second way is to reflect, study, and learn the Buddha's teachings without continuously chanting his name, but instead focusing on understanding what the Buddha taught, seeking to apply it. 3. The third way is to live according to the Buddha's teachings every day, doing what he taught, and putting his teachings into practice. So, which of these three ways is the best? It must be the third way. That is the true practitioner of Buddha's remembrance. The one who truly remembers the Buddha. It is not the person who spends all their time chanting the Buddha's name, thinking that they are the one who has the most merit. Is this not an example of right thought mistaken for wrong, and wrong thought mistaken for right? Yes. Exactly. It is not just the outsiders. Even within the Buddhist path, we too can fall into this trap. Only the divine beings truly know when we are wrong. But if you were to tell me I am wrong, I would resist. This is the belief I have held since childhood. But little did I know. In truth, I have been wrong. I have been wrong in past lives. And now, I continue in the same mistaken ways. Just like those who worship fire or bathe in the Ganges. Even today, they still believe in these things. Don't think they've stopped believing. They still believe. But because I follow the Buddha's teachings, I have escaped this. There is a similar story in the Buddhist sutras. A person who passed away came to a dream and said that they were cold and had no clothes. The venerable monks instructed to buy cloth, offer it to the monks, and also give it to the poor, and then dedicate the merit to the deceased. Suddenly, the deceased benefited from the merit, not by burning paper clothes. Or there is a mantra that some people chant, believing it brings great merit for both life and death. But in reality, the divine beings looking down from above would laugh because there is no merit in it. What is true merit? It is compassion, the love for all beings. The person who has a heart full of love for all beings carries a great mantra in their heart, one that makes even the divine beings love them. But if a person does not have love for others, and only chants meaningless mantras with their lips, then the divine beings do not care for them. There is another story. A nun who practiced esoteric Buddhism, chanted many mantras, and often did good deeds, helping the poor. However, when she passed away, she had an accident and years later came in a dream to tell her disciples that she had not yet transcended, still wandering and had not attained liberation. She asked her disciples to pray for her. This puzzled her disciples because people saw the nun practicing so much, chanting mantras, and doing good deeds. Why then, after her death, had she not attained liberation? This is the issue we need to reflect on, the things we think are merit, but the divine beings do not accept. Therefore, how should we know what true merit is? True merit is what? We have a vast path laid out before us. But how do we know what true merit is? So we can walk on it. If we don't know, we must be careful. Because sometimes those we trust to guide us may be teaching us wrongly. The teachers we think are bringing us the truth might also be mistaken. And we may follow them, accumulating illusory merit. When we die, neither we nor our teachers will transcend. We will still be wandering. Just like our teacher. The misunderstanding of merit and true practice. While alive, we may firmly believe that the actions we perform, as taught by our teachers, are great merits. However, after death, we may realize that we were wrong. This is a very frightening thought. There are cases, for example, of a prison warden. The warden sounds frightening, doesn't he? But this particular warden loved his prisoners, taught them moral values, and when they were released from prison, he would help them find jobs. He set up farms nearby and took some of the prisoners in as adoptive children. He would help them find wives and husbands, and he cared for their lives. When he passed away, he ascended to heaven. He didn't know any specific religion, but the divine beings still acknowledged him. The divine beings immediately praised him, saying, "This man has practiced real merit. Well done." On the other hand, many people who identify as Buddhists, including monks, may chant countless sutras and mantras, but after death, they receive no merit at all. They end up waiting around the temple, eating from alms and waiting for more offerings, as if they have no real merit. While alive, they might think that they have infinite merit. But in reality, this is a sad truth. Today, we say this, and it might offend many of our venerable monks and nuns. But it must be said. The Dhammapada is very important, as it warns us that right thought can be mistaken for wrong, and wrong thought mistaken for right. This leads us to fall into delusions. And this isn't only in other religions, it can happen in Buddhism too. Delusions have entered Buddhism, and this is a very hard issue to recognize. Every religion has its flaws in this regard. People think they have great merit and believe that anyone who follows this religion will ascend to heaven. We also see religions that encourage people to do extreme acts, such as telling them to strap bombs to themselves and commit suicide along with others to cause terror. They believe that after death, they will ascend to heaven and have 72 virgins waiting for them to enjoy pleasure. Yet, there are still people who believe this. But in reality, those who commit suicide and kill others will immediately fall into hell because they have caused unjust deaths and caused suffering to many families, even if they believe they will ascend to heaven. This is clearly a wrong belief. We can observe that many religions have such mistaken ideas. Some religions teach that if you kneel and serve a deity as a slave, you can ask for anything and it will be granted. But is that true merit? What merit is there in that? The only good thing here is humility. Because by kneeling and asking for things from the deity, you are only expressing your own humility, acknowledging that you are the servant of that deity. This is only humility. But the rest of the practices are distorted and incorrect. In Buddhism, there is also a mistaken idea. Many people think that when they grow old, they should ordain as a monk or nun to create the conditions for being able to ordain in their next life. They believe that if they ordain in this life, they will have the opportunity to ordain again in their next life. But this is a great misunderstanding. Ordaining as a monk or nun is not just for the respect and offerings from others. When one is old, no longer able to practice, but still receives respect and offerings, that is the end of their merit. The merit of a monk or nun must come from action and actual merit. If one ordains just to receive respect and offerings, then they will not have the merit to be ordained in the next life. The condition for ordaining is tied to merit. If there is no merit, the opportunity to ordain will not be realized. Some people ask how they can ordain as a monk or nun. I would tell them that first, they must show respect to those who have ordained, and respect their teachers, so they may become teachers in the future. It is like respecting the Buddha in order to become a Buddha. Showing respect to monks and nuns is the foundation for eventually ordaining. But if one only shows respect without actually practicing, without making offerings and genuinely creating conditions, they will not be able to ordain in the true sense. To truly ordain, one must make offerings to those who are ordained, and in the next life, they will receive respect and offerings in return. However, if one only receives respect without making offerings, they will not be able to study. They won't be able to teach the Dharma. They won't have disciples. And they will have to live a difficult life, struggling as ordinary people. In the end, they will still live as ordinary beings, suffering just like everyone else. Becoming a truly ordained monk and avoiding misunderstandings. To become a truly ordained monk with complete merit, one must cultivate many conditions and not rush to enjoy blessings too early. Only when one has accumulated sufficient merit can they truly ordain. have a proper dwelling, maintain proper conduct, and possess the ability to teach and guide others. Only then can ordination be meaningful, complete, and mature. If someone hastily ordains just to receive respect and reverence, they may lose their opportunity for a proper ordination in this life, and may even not be reborn as a human in the next life. In some cases, there are dogs at the temple that are actually individuals who were monks in their past lives. Because they did not cultivate the right conditions, they have fallen into the realm of dogs and must live around the temple, listening to the chanting but unable to return to human form to practice again. This shows that rushing into ordination without understanding the true purpose, just to gain blessings, can lead to unfortunate consequences. This is something we must be cautious about because we can mistake the right for wrong, and wrong for right, leading us astray. There are also people who think that practicing Buddhism is all about attaining liberation, but they misunderstand what true liberation is. They think liberation means doing nothing, avoiding all involvement, and maintaining an empty mind. At first, this may seem logical, but in reality, it is a misconception. Living in such a way would lead to society looking down on you, and the divine beings would not accept you either. A true practitioner must have a great heart, always engaged in righteous work, doing good deeds, and benefiting others. They must be busy with saving lives and helping sentient beings, not just sitting idly avoiding attachments. True liberation requires great merit. It is about constant effort to help sentient beings and do good deeds, not about living passively, doing nothing. If one only maintains an empty and pure mind without taking action, they will not achieve liberation. Such a mind may be the merit of the heavenly realms. But if one remains stagnant there and does nothing to evolve further, they will eventually fall into disorder, and the mind will no longer be stable. These misconceptions have led many to go astray, believing that they are getting closer to enlightenment when, in fact, they are standing outside the true path without realizing it. In Buddhism, there are also many mistaken views, and we need to be careful not to get caught in these false beliefs. Today, we ask the Buddha for guidance, to help us remove the mistaken views from our minds, leaving only the true Dharma. From there, we can walk the correct path to enlightenment, without being misled. Currently, in the world, we often think that in a vote or election, the minority must submit to the majority. That is, when there is a vote, the side with more people wins. The opinion that is accepted by most people must be implemented. However, this is not always true. People often assume that the majority is right, but they forget that the majority can sometimes be wrong. In the past, Sanjaya noted that there are fewer wise people than ignorant ones in the world. And this is true when it comes to the opinions of the majority. It is often the opinion of the ignorant, not the wise. This is a painful truth in the world today. Even though we have entered the 21st century, from the most civilized countries to the poorest ones, there are still people who believe that the majority is always right. International laws, national constitutions, conventions, declarations, etc., can all be wrong because they are based on the majority. Even though people believe that the majority must be right, in reality, the majority can be bought or manipulated. For example, in a parliament, when representatives vote on a law, the majority decides. However, often these representatives are swayed by bribery, and because of a large sum of money, they vote in favor of something that benefits a specific group of people. This shows that the majority is not always the truth, and the decisions of the majority are not always correct. Throughout history, when the German people voted for Adolf Hitler, a man who caused worldwide terror, The majority supported this wrong decision. This is why we cannot simply rely on the majority to determine what is right and wrong. Sanjaya's pursuit of popularity and the danger of following the majority. Although Sanjaya correctly observed that there are fewer wise people than ignorant ones, he was mistaken in following the majority. He was driven by the desire for fame and wealth, hoping to gain more disciples to prove his victory in life. However, his goal was not to find the true path to liberation but to seek respect from the majority. Ultimately, when his disciples, such as Sariputta, Exaloifat, and Moggallana, Mukkyalin, left him to follow the Buddha, Sanjaya died in pain and disappointment. This is a painful lesson about the blindness of pursuing the majority and fame, instead of seeking the true path of enlightenment. Today, many religions and religious leaders refuse to abandon their mistaken views, even though they realize that their teachings are outdated and no longer relevant. Instead of abandoning these outdated beliefs and seeking the truth, they continue to propagate their doctrines in areas where people are less aware of their errors. This is something we need to understand, even though we live in an advanced era. We must remain vigilant against mistaken views, whether they come from the majority or from those in power. Always seek the truth, and do not be deceived by the superficial approval of the majority or the guidance of those who lack true wisdom. Buddhism's role in modern society today. We must recognize that the role of a Buddhist is not only to practice in the temple but also to go into the remote areas, into the forests, into places where the truth has not yet been understood, to help others, especially ethnic minorities, recognize the truth. We must not let them continue to be misled by religions that the rest of the world has already recognized as erroneous. Misconceptions about national prosperity. Another misconception today is the way we measure a country's prosperity. People often assess whether a country is successful or not based on indicators like per capita income or gross domestic product, GDP. Countries with higher incomes are seen as prosperous, while those with lower incomes are considered poor. This is a grave mistake, as it uses money as a measure of happiness and development. When a country continues to focus on increasing income growth by pushing people to work tirelessly, it inadvertently creates a society filled with stress, exhaustion, and fear. People work endlessly, with no time to rest or enjoy life. They fear losing their jobs, being unable to pay off debts, losing their homes, or losing their cars. What do all these feelings reflect? They are the state of slaves. Even if a country is wealthy, if its people do not have control over their lives, if they are constantly living in fear and stress, then they are no different from the slaves of the past. Today, while we may talk about democracy and freedom, if people are still measured by money and live under constant work pressure, then that is just a form of modern-day slavery. On the other hand, some countries with lower average incomes, but which live with culture, ethics, discipline, and, most importantly, love and mutual support, are truly happier. The people in these countries may not work relentlessly, but they work with care, responsibility, and without worry or stress. That is a truly happy society. Changing our economic perspectives. It is time to change our economic perspective. The goal should not be income growth or GDP expansion, but ensuring that people can live peaceful lives, without fear, stress, or the need to work endlessly. The world needs to change and build a society where people are not enslaved by money but can live with diligence, responsibility, and joy. Misconceptions about money, sacrifice, and personal growth ****. There is a common misconception that money is everything. To acquire money, people are often willing to sacrifice everything, including their conscience, dignity, and morals. They believe that having money will bring happiness. But the result is often suffering. Loss of everything, including their honor. On the other hand, there are families living in poverty whose money is always earned honestly. They raise their children with hard-earned, clean money. Although they may not be wealthy, their family is always happy. And their children are well-behaved and know how to live virtuously. While they may lack material wealth, their emotional bonds and happiness are complete. Another story illustrates a misconception about killing. We need to have a broader and scientifically informed perspective. The precept of not killing is about protecting life. But human life and the environment must be prioritized. Protecting human health and the environment is important. And sometimes killing pests like flies and mosquitoes is necessary, especially when they can harm public health. From these stories, we can learn that in life, one cannot rely solely on strength or money to control life. Misconceptions will only lead to painful outcomes and losses. To truly be happy, one must live with ethics, responsibility, and love. Patience and wisdom are the keys to protecting what is right and building a peaceful and happy life. The misconception about parental sacrifice. Another common misconception is about the sacrifice parents make for their children. Some people believe that when parents sacrifice everything for their children, the children only need to focus on studying and not worry about anything else. They think that as long as children excel academically, that is enough. But this is a grave mistake. If children are taught only to focus on their studies without being taught ethics, respect, and love for others, they will grow up to be selfish and lack empathy. They may become successful, but they will lack character and compassion. If children are taught respect, doing good deeds, and love, even if they are slow to succeed, their success will be solid and lasting. The misconception about self-promotion. Some people also fall into the misconception of self-promotion. They feel a sense of joy when talking about their achievements, such as buying expensive things or knowing famous people. They boast about things they think make them stand out. But in reality, this is merely feeding their ego and sense of self-importance. A true practitioner, when praised, feels uncomfortable and arrogant. When asked about his greatness, would humbly reply, "I am just an ordinary person." He finds peace in that humility. And that is true happiness. Try this experiment, and you will realize the truth. When you meet a friend who praises you, you will feel pleased. But it is a fleeting joy driven by the ego. Then, try meeting another friend and criticize yourself, and you will experience an unusual peace. This feeling is not temporary satisfaction but profound happiness. Through this, you will recognize what is right and wrong in life. Recognizing right and wrong. It is not always easy to distinguish right from wrong. Many people speak eloquently, but if we are not careful, we may think they are correct when, in fact, they are wrong. The ability to distinguish between right and wrong is a mystery of the soul, and not everyone can easily recognize it. However, only when we truly understand it can we clearly see the path to true happiness. The role of merit in recognizing right and wrong. The ability to discern right from wrong is not always simple. It is a profound mystery of the soul. What helps us discern right from wrong is the merit accumulated in past lives. This merit is not easily acquired, but it is a hidden, auspicious connection from previous lives that grants us wisdom in the present, enabling us to clearly distinguish what is right and wrong, and to live with right views. Once we possess this wisdom, the path to enlightenment becomes shorter. For example, in a past life, you may have encountered a teacher. One day, you came to him and said you wanted to follow him. But with one condition: he should not take too many disciples. Because you did not want to live in a noisy, crowded place. The teacher replied, "You should not think so narrowly. Those who come here, whether they follow the path or not, have their own destiny. My duty as a teacher is to open my heart with compassion and help them." Upon hearing his words, you realized your thinking was selfish and wrong. You knelt down to apologize and repent. It was from that moment that you created a virtuous cause. And in future lives, you would have the wisdom to distinguish right from wrong clearly. If, in that life, you had argued with the teacher and refused to admit your mistake, you would have lost the ability to discern right from wrong, which would affect your future lives. Another example is in a past life. You may have given a book of teachings to someone. This gesture helped them better understand life and realize things they needed to know. As a result, in future lives, you would always possess the ability to discern right from wrong accurately. Past virtue and the path to wisdom. In another life, you might have participated in a Dharma assembly, listening to profound and accurate teachings. Not only did you go by yourself, but you also encouraged others to join. Such actions created merit in the past, which helps you always discern right from wrong in future lives. Sometimes, you might have meditated, and when thoughts arose, you did not accept any of them. You let go of everything, keeping your mind calm, waiting for the truth to emerge. By rejecting your thoughts, you created great merit that helps you understand right and wrong more clearly in future lives. Or perhaps, in a past life, you bowed before the Buddha with utmost respect. The Buddha is the source of truth and wisdom. By showing this reverence, you created a foundation for always recognizing what is right and what is wrong in future lifetimes. The merit accumulated in past lives is the source of wisdom that helps us distinguish right from wrong. This is not the result of intelligence or knowledge from this life. It is humility, ethics, and the merits of past lives that grant us this wisdom. We should not rely on our education. Many educated people, doctors, engineers, or PhDs, can still be easily misled by false teachings or superstitions. Simply having a high level of education does not guarantee the ability to discern right from wrong. It is the merit from past lives that helps us understand what is accurate and what is erroneous. The sharper and clearer our ability to distinguish right from wrong, the more we are on the true path of a practitioner, the path of sainthood. To understand what a saint is, remember this simple point: a saint is someone who knows what is right and what is wrong. When someone asks you, "What is a saint?" don't answer by saying they possess magical powers or have exceptional physical beauty. Don't think that a saint must have extraordinary qualities or perform miraculous feats. The correct and simple definition of a saint is a person who knows what is right and what is wrong. However, to elaborate, a saint does not just know right and wrong in a superficial sense, they know it deeply, down to the smallest detail. They understand even the most subtle aspects of the human soul, things that only highly wise people can see. They know not only the events in the human realm but also the happenings in the heavenly realms. In other words, they do not just understand right and wrong at a surface level, they comprehend everything thoroughly, from the minutiae of this world to higher spiritual truths. That is a saint, someone for whom everything right is clear and everything wrong is recognized. In modern life, especially in fields like politics, economics, military strategy, or technology, those who grasp accurate information succeed. Information is the key to victory. Intelligence agencies around the world always seek to gather information, from scientific research to military or political strategies. Those who have accurate information will rise to the top. In the same way, a person who knows good and evil, right and wrong, merit and demerit, follows the path of a saint. It is that simple. If we look at the story of Sanjaya, we see why he refused to follow the Buddha. First, it was due to pride. He was older than the Buddha, when the Buddha was 35 to 36. Sanjaya was almost 70. So he could not accept being a disciple of someone younger than him. Second, it was because of his desire for fame. He wanted to be a leader, to start his own sect, rather than follow a true master. Third, he valued reputation more than truth. He believed that leadership was more important than enlightenment. Sanjaya made a mistake. And from this mistake, we can learn valuable lessons for ourselves. In life, we may encounter similar mistakes. The first is pride. When we meet someone younger but more accomplished, we might feel insulted. The second is the desire for fame, when we want to be the leader, to gain recognition, even if it's small. The third is the disregard for truth, when we place reputation above truth, not respecting the reality. Thus, in life, we must always be cautious. When facing someone younger but more skilled, don't let pride take over. When you want to become a leader or gain fame, remember that truth and enlightenment are more important. And when facing the truth, be ready to bow your head and respect it, even if it may be difficult. Finally, to develop wisdom to distinguish right from wrong, we must remain humble. Always think that we know nothing, that what we know is but a drop in the vast ocean of truth. If we keep this mindset, we will accumulate merit and gain the ability to discern right from wrong, good from evil. Then, life will become clearer, and we will walk the true path of sainthood. Today, we study a verse, and we see its profound meaning. Our lives have passed through much suffering and joy, much crying and laughter. Everything is like a dream. Now, the most important thing is to retain what is necessary to continue through this life and the next, to attain liberation according to the Buddha's teachings. May we know what is right and recognize what is wrong, so that we may abide in right view and the path of enlightenment, not standing outside it. May all beings attain this as well. Namo Buddhaya. Answering common questions of Buddhists. 1. Taking refuge is a strong vow and should not be delayed. Taking refuge is not just about bowing before the Buddha, but it is a commitment to follow the path of practice for life, to uphold the vow of learning and practicing the teachings. Observing precepts and maintaining vows is very important, and there should be no hesitation. 2. The Lotus Sutra and family difficulties. The Lotus Sutra is known for its deep teachings, but it also contains passages that criticize arhats, which may cause some to feel displeased when chanting it. This sometimes leads to difficulties in family life or work. Therefore, when chanting the Lotus Sutra, one should understand the true meaning of each section to avoid allowing negative emotions to impact their everyday life. 3. On performing rituals when encountering spirits. There are cases where spirits in the home may appear, causing disturbances and fear. This may be due to a lack of practice or insufficient spiritual power. If one has been practicing for a long time and has spiritual virtue, spirits will not dare approach. When sleeping, your spiritual virtue will emanate strongly, and spirits will not dare come near. If the spirits themselves practice, they will lose their evil intentions and become peaceful. Living with them will be calm and loving. If you want to encounter spirits without fear, you must practice correctly. Bow to the Buddha, cultivate a loving heart, and maintain humility. This is the mantra, the mindset, and the foundation for building strong spiritual virtue. With this, spirits will not dare come near. Thus, we conclude the story. May all beings find peace and joy. Diligently practice the teachings, preserve virtue, and meditate according to the Buddha's instructions. Namo Buddha Shakyamuni.